What is your role at Oldham Community Radio?
I'm the station manager, which basically means that I've got to make sure that the thing works. And that all the forms, anything that we have to do to be sort of legal and decent, Ofcom returns and such like things, I have to make sure that they're done. And if things don't happen, or if somebody's off, it falls back to me to make sure that we carry on and the programmes work and that the station does what it's set out to do and that we find the money.
How long has Oldham Community Radio been on air for?
We've been on air full time since March 2007, so six and a half years. But that was when we sort of got on air. The idea of community radio stations in this country, for many years, when I was your age, and for many years after that, when people talked about ordinary community radio stations or any sort of radio stations, it was like, oh, not enough frequencies. Surprisingly, the 300 or so stations, there's 300 or so commercial stations in this country now, and 200 and odd community radio stations, that some of these frequencies have suddenly been discovered. I think not. That they were always there, there just wasn't the will to use them. So we've been on air 24 hours a day since March St Patrick's Day it was, 2007, March 17th. But before that, we'd sort of been working probably for 10 years prior to that to get to a point. I mean, we applied for the licence in 2004, and we'd done 2 years prior to that, all sorts of other things. So that's how long we've been on air.
What type of broadcast does Oldham Community Radio send?
It varies. What we try to do is that we try to broadcast what we call programme strands, in that we try to interest the majority of Oldham people at various times, or involve them with the station. And what we do that by saying that we're consistent about certain programme strands. So the afternoons is a programme slot called the wireless programme. Now the wireless programme, we normally say to people, if you're old enough to have ever listened to the wireless, which is what people used to call the radio before it was called the radio, and it was called the wireless because, initially when loudspeakers and things like that were invented 100 years ago, they were all connected by wires, and then suddenly somebody came along with this thing where there weren't any wires, it was wireless. So that was the radios that people had we'll say before the Second World War, after the First World War, before the Second World War, the radios in the home, big things, that was the only means of communication electronically, the quick means of communication. So that's one strand that aims at an older audience that nobody else is targeting anywhere in this area.
That's true.
So, and that is phenomenally popular, so that we've got people that editorially, everything we do is really about Oldham. Oldham's the best place on earth. We tell everybody that doesn't live here, because they don't know that it's the best place on earth. So editorially it's all about Oldham, but with the wireless programme there's people in Tameside, in Stockport, in Manchester, in Bury, in Bolton even, and Middleton and Rochdale, who will listen to the wireless programme because it takes them, the music that's played is the music when they were young. And the music, you'll find out, the music that you enjoyed when you were young, or when you are young, and you met your first girlfriends and so on and so forth, and you went out with your pals and all that sort of stuff, that music will always be the best music in your life ever. So when you're 60, 70 years old and you're looking back, the music that you want to hear is the music that you listen to now.
Still holds that sentimental value.
So it's like those. That's one thing, and that scores us very, very, very heavily. One of the other things that we don't do, unlike most radio stations would say their prime time audience is a breakfast programme, and we said actually every other radio station, of which there's 20 or 30 in Manchester, in the Greater Manchester area. Every other radio station is doing a breakfast programme. We can't beat Radio 4 for hard news. We can't beat Radio 1 or Key 103 for their stuff. So we said, well, we won't even try to. We'll do it differently. Instead of the people that get the benefit, that get the gain, being the audience, we'll turn it round, and we've offered it to schools and colleges and say, showcase what you do. You've got your students at school. Tell them, get them doing it. Now, we'll get that to work someday. It's not fully worked, but we're getting there. So we target different audiences at different times. Late in the evening, like we're talking now, it will be much more young person orientated. At different times, it will be different. But basically, the message is you've got to share it. You can't all have your own radio station. Although we do actually notice the fact that there's a lot of radio stations for young people, and if we just reproduce that, we wouldn't be providing anything different. We'd just be more of the same, and we're determined not to be more of the same.
What messages do you feel that Oldham Community Radio sends?
Well, I'll tell you, the first one's that Oldham's the best place on earth, but like everywhere else, as Oldhamers, we like to, as everybody else anywhere in the country, you like to poke your own authorities. So we'll give Oldham Council a bit of grief from time to time, and we'll also give them praise and credit. And and what we try to do is to let people in on events that are going on. So there are masses of things going on in Oldham every day, and I'm talking about Oldham, not just the town of Oldham, the areas around it. Masses of things going on every day that are really good, and that people work very hard to make sure they happen. So in terms of the what's on type information, we tell people about that. And we get last year, or earlier this year, Failsworth Carnival. We had people who came to Failsworth Carnival from Stockport because they listened to the radio station. It was on, and they thought, oh, right, well, we'll go and see that. And they came, and we were there, and they came and said hello to us and things like that. And it was great. And then other things like, actually today I got a phone call from a lady who, at the beginning of the year, I think, at the end of last year and the beginning of this year, we'd been promoting an energy switching scheme whereby people could change the gas supplier or electric supplier and save money, and it was being supported by the council, and we thought, well, that's a good idea, we'll promote that. We told people all about it and that. Anyway, a lady rang up today. She was wanting a bit more information because she'd had her bill, one bill, but she hadn't had one for about 5 months, and she was getting a bit worried that she'd get a big bill because she hadn't had a bill for 5 months. And she was getting in touch with us because, as far as she was concerned, we were the people that helped to persuade her to do that. And I'm immensely proud of that. And some of the other things, we do an annual listener survey to find out who's listening. And some of the comments, absolutely lovely. People think it's wonderful. And we're all, I nearly said, I'll say it, but we're all common. We're ordinary people. We talk like people in Oldham. And, that's because we are. We're talking to people in Oldham. And it was one of the biggest compliments I ever got was that somebody said we were doing a commentary on a rugby match. And the bit came back that the commentators were talking about the game and describing it. And somebody said, it's like going to a match with your mate. Because we're biased. We want Oldham to win. We don't want whoever the other team is to win. And we want Oldham to win. And if they don't win, we're upset, like everybody else. And it's like, yeah, that's okay, because we'll give credit to the other team. But if it's Rochdale, we'll poke fun at them on and off all the time. And if they eventually do manage to beat us, as they did, that's devil, then fair enough. But we're about being Oldhamers and being proud that we're Oldhamers. So yeah, that's